If you're considering becoming a governor, the easiest thing is just do it. Being a good governor does not mean having direct experience of education. You do not have to be a parent, you do not have to be a teacher, you do not have to, know the education system. All it involves really is a willingness to get involved in how the school is being run, a willingness to ask questions, a willingness to challenge, a willingness to help and to want to be there and to want to be a part of that community. It's been a real development experience for me as well. I mean, for example, I was involved in the hiring of our latest deputy head. I was involved in a tribunal panel when there was a complaint made. I was being involved in this whole process of the school merger. All these quite tangible experiences that I wouldn't have had in another context has actually been interesting for me and has been a real development experience for me as well. I think you can get as much as you give if you just give it a try.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session on professional and personal development via school governance roles here at our Governors for Schools Conference 2021. I hope you all enjoyed that video. Cyrus has done quite a bit of my work for me in the first part of today's session today. As a brief introduction, my name is Lloyd. I'm the head of key accounts and London operations at the charity Governors for Schools. I sit in the senior leadership team, and I'm a school governor at a free-form entry primary school in Islington in North London. I'm joined by my colleague Emma.
Hello everybody, I'm Emma Harris. I'm Senior Partnerships Manager for Governors for Schools. I'm up in the Northwest, and I'm also a school governor at a maintained primary school and at a maintained nursery school.
Oh, my apologies. I did mean to give a slight audio description of myself before we started. For anyone that's on the call that's visually impaired, I am male, white male. I'm in my mid-30s. I'm wearing a green and white check shirt, and I've got short dark brown hair, which is behaving itself for once.
I'm white female. I'm 41 with blonde-ish hair tied back.
And we're delighted to be joined today by three panelists who will be sharing their experiences on this topic. Firstly, just a quick introduction to Leah De Silva.
Hello, delighted to be here. I'm Leah De Silva. By way of an audio description, I have black hair, I'm brown skinned, I wear glasses, I'm early 40s, maybe slightly mid 40s, but we'll say early 40s for now. And I'm wearing a white t-shirt with a blue blazer today. And I work for the CIPD, but more of that later.
Thank you very much, Leah. We're also joined by Cassie Lloyd Perry.
Hi, I'm Cassie. I am a school governor at a local authority maintained school in London, primary, and I'm an HR professional by background. I'm a fellow of the CIPD, but actually about to start as head of strategy at a non-profit working on gender inclusion and wider inclusion in the private equity industry, which is where I've worked for the last 7 or 8 years. In terms of description, I am a white woman of British and Roma descent in my early to mid 30s, similar qualification to Leah there, and I am wearing glasses and I have long brown hair and wearing very bright top and lipstick.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Jason Hyde.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Jason Hyde. I'm a school governor at an all-through school as part of the Multi-Academy Trust. I'm also on the Board of Trustees for the Trust. By way of profession, I'm a principal civil engineer. And in terms of an audio description, I'm a white male in my early 30s. I have short brown hair that is not behaving itself today. And I'm also wearing glasses and a white and blue striped shirt.
That's wonderful. Before we get started with the session, we've just got a few housekeeping points to go through. Closed captions are available for anyone that would like to access them today. As you'll see, speakers have been invited to share. We've now shared a short verbal description of ourselves, and for the purposes of this webinar, the chat function is disabled. If you have any questions for any of our speakers or for Governors of Schools, please do enter these during the question and answer panel, which you can find in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. We will answer these collectively at the end, and my colleague Emma will be on hand to answer any that need answering, as we go through the session. The session is being recorded. Links to the video will be sent out. None of our speakers today are using slides, so we won't be sharing any slides. There's no slides to share afterwards, but we will also send links out to resources and contact details for our guest speakers if there are any questions or anything that you'd like to follow up with any of them after speaking today. Please do continue to follow the conference and like and share our content on social media using the hashtag GfS Conference 2021 hashtag. We're on the penultimate day of our conference. There's been lots of really fantastic sessions so far, all of which have been recorded, and the majority of which are available for you to watch back on the video. So if there's anything that you've missed on the conference session, please do go back and read that and revisit those. You can watch all those recordings back on the conference section of our website. And finally, we'd be really grateful if you could complete a short post-session survey. This is our first at the conference, and we're really keen to make sure that the sessions that we run are as absolutely good as they can be and take any lessons that we need to learn forward for next year. So we'd be really grateful if you could take the time to complete the short post-session survey once we're finished today. Next slide, please. And here we have, just a reminder of who our three speakers are. Kindly come to us. I'll do a brief bit, and then I'll hand over to Leah, Cassie, and Jason in turn, and they'll talk to you about their experiences and their professional expertise that they can bring that they'll be bringing to the conversations today. I'm assuming that some of us in the webinar today are indeed already school governors, but others are also here to learn more about the role. For those who are newer to governors, I thought it would be useful to discuss what a school governor is and does. To give a brief overview, the governor role is strategic rather than operational. Governors don't get involved with the day-to-day running of the school. Instead, they work at board level to support and challenge the school's leadership team to drive school improvement. School governors are passionate about improving opportunities for all young people, and to do this, they volunteer their time, skills, and experience to impact the effectiveness of the schools or schools that they support. Three key areas that governors are involved in are setting the strategic vision, providing challenge, and ensuring financial probity. Collectively, governors need to work as a body to ensure the school has a clear sense of where it is going and what it is trying to achieve in the short, medium, and long term. To achieve this, governors need to have a clear understanding of benchmarks on this journey. Where do we want to be at the end of the autumn term by July 2022? What does success look like for the school this year, and what might prevent us from achieving it? These questions and answers will vary from school to school, but asking and finding out is a key part of how we hold the school leadership accountable. And you can see from the strategic aspect, of the role, that ability coming in and not getting involved in the nitty-gritty sort of operational day-to-day that our wonderful school staff involved in, that there's a fantastic opportunity for personal and professional development for us to learn more, and that's what our three speakers will be helping bring to life for you this lunchtime. If we can move on to the next slide, please. It has long been taken as a given that school governance roles are an excellent source of professional development for those undertaking them. However, limited research into the exact nature of this professional development had been undertaken in recent years. As a charity, we carried out research with governors and some of our key partners in 2019 to understand the professional development that they were experiencing in their governance roles. And the research revealed a close match between the skills used in the school governance context and in the corporate professional context. In particular, governors recognised significant overlap in the following areas. And they are providing challenge and asking probing questions, strategic planning, developing professional relationships, and leading, persuading, or influencing others. Additionally, governors reported strong development in these transferable skills, which in turn has led to enhanced performance in the workplace. This has also reported strong growth in preparation, flexibility, and agility, analysing performance data and KPIs, and financial literacy skills, and being confident in securing value for money in the procurement exercises that they were undertaking. Many of these attributes and competencies are associated with high-level management and leadership roles. They are particularly valuable for those seeking career progression up to CEO level with the non-executive director roles, and are highlighted extensively in corporate skills development frameworks. All the employees that we were able to speak to said that they felt more confident and assertive after becoming governor. This was grounded in the proven self-belief that they could function quickly, effectively, and assertively in an unfamiliar, high-level and challenging setting without being overawed. Self-esteem is further boosted by the respect they attracted from others because of the perceived gravitas of the school governor role. Alongside, I know from personal experience that whenever I speak to anyone involved in school governance, and when I think about my own school governance role, I also derive a huge sense of personal well-being and personal development, learning more about the communities that I live in, and the challenges facing them, and being inspired by the incredible work done by so many of our schools and leaders across the country. I'm delighted now to hand over to the first of our three guest speakers who've kindly joined us today. And first, Leah, if I can hand over to you to talk to us a little bit about about the work that you do in the view that you have on the field of volunteering.
Thanks, Will. And there's a couple of things that I'll touch on that Will's introduced. But as I mentioned earlier, my name's Leah De Silva. I'm the Social Impact and Innovation Manager at the CIPD. So for those of you who don't know much about the CIPD, we are the professional body for HR and people development. We are experts on the world of work, and we see ourselves very much as a career partner for our membership base, which is over 160,000 now globally. And we see ourselves as a true career partner, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But I think it's worth saying, first of all, that we are supremely passionate about volunteering. And actually, we're an organisation that is pretty much powered by our volunteers. We have a thriving branches network, which is collections of HR professionals and people professionals up and down the country that have formed hubs to create local networks, to share information, advice and guidance, to support each other, and to really support our purpose, which is around championing better work and working lives, and disseminating that through the community. So they're all volunteers. Added to that, we have our own volunteering programs, and certainly the remit of me and my team, I suppose, is to identify where there are barriers to better work and working lives, and seeing how we can get around that and develop and devise new interventions, many of which are volunteering programs themselves that include mentoring and pairing people together to sort of do that, and also encouraging our membership with their specific expertise and skills around demystifying the world of work and supporting workforces to actually give back via our own volunteering programs or third-party programs like this one, which is fantastic. I wanted to talk a little bit, first of all, about this commitment to learning and actually seeing ourselves as a career partner. I think it ties in with what Will just talked about in terms of the corporate framework and looking at some of the expertise and skills that volunteering can really develop. We have lots of programs that support young people into work. We have programs like the Enterprise Advisor Scheme that sees senior leaders go into schools and work with career leaders to understand some of the barriers to getting young people into work. And we have more and more opportunity for senior people to give back. And I think one of the things that's really stood out in the last couple of years as we've developed our own profession map, and I'm sure lots of professional bodies will have similar corporate frameworks as Will described, but really the profession map is our benchmark for the people profession. It's a set of standards, it's principles led and evidence based and outcomes driven, and it's a way for any individual within the people profession to map themselves throughout their career, whether they're just starting out or certainly moving towards the senior levels of their career, to see where gaps might be and where we can help through training and qualifications, and where to go out and seek expertise and skills to plug those gaps. And I think it's fair to say previously, volunteering and our professional framework might have been further apart from each other, but it's great to see they're actually growing closer together. And I think volunteering has moved from a nice to have and a fluffy element of what we've done to a really intrinsic part of that. Hopefully you can hear me a bit now. I'll try and speak up. My microphone's on max, so sorry for that if you missed a bit of that. But we've spent a little bit of time mapping the voluntary experience of some of our members onto our profession map and really demonstrating the impact that our people professionals can have. It looks at sort of the core behaviours, the core values and the core skills that are needed within our profession, and how you can actually develop them through organisations and initiatives like this. Just talking to what Will was saying, one of the biggest areas when we survey our members who are volunteering on programmes of this nature that they've been able to develop is that relationship and stakeholder management piece, the ability to negotiate and influence. And interestingly enough, one of the things we launched about 2 years ago, and I'll talk about a specific programme, was a programme called the Aspiring HRD programme, which is around trying to connect aspiring leaders who want to get to that sort of HR director position in the next 2 or 3 years with existing senior leaders to create a mentoring partnership to support them and help with that transition. It is underpinned by learning interactions, and I think in the second module, one of the key learnings is around developing that sort of board level presence and actually the senior level strategic experience that you need to step up into that director role, and leaving behind some of the operational and function head responsibilities you may well have. And that's an area that I think has been really interesting when you look at volunteering, because for many people going through that transition, there may or may not be the opportunity to observe a board meeting in their organisation, or actually have a voice at that table, flex some of those muscles and test out those skills and see where their gaps are. And what we're increasingly finding is we're directing our members and our volunteers to voluntary roles to see if they can actually flex their muscles in that way. So sitting on the board of a school as a governor is a great way of doing that, as is becoming a trustee or some of the other opportunities too. I think it allows that greater exposure to different voices, different backgrounds, and insight into the running of the board, ethical and political dilemmas, egos around the table as well. This is all really meaty stuff that helps that transition to more senior level roles, and it's something that we're seeing come up more and more and more and more, and certainly something that we're encouraging across our membership, not just because it's a good thing to do, but because it benefits their continuing learning journey and their professional development, whether you're going for a new job, a promotion, or even if you're upgrading your membership at the CIPD, there's an opportunity to use your voluntary experience to demonstrate that impact and that trajectory as you move through your career and the development of skills, which I think is fantastic. I think one of the things I wanted to do before I joined this, and it's great to be on such a stellar panel, but I spoke to one of our volunteer members who's super active. You know, she's a governor for a school. She's also sits on a magistrates panel. She's a non-exec on a board as well. And I said to her, you know, what do you gain from this voluntary experience? What sort of skills are you developing? And she talked a lot about some of the things that Will touched on, I think, as well, that negotiation, that influence piece, as I've talked about having that voice around the board. And the confidence to sort of overcome your own imposter syndrome to actually develop those skills. But one of the nicest things she said, and I think it's probably one of the things I'll leave you with, is just that she said it gives her hope that she is more than just her job title. There is an opportunity to develop skills outside of your organisation, outside of your role, and flex those muscles that you sometimes don't get the opportunity to use. So I think, I mean, for me, I'm a trustee of a local charity. It gives me lots of exposure in the same way as a role of this nature might do. And I've had the delight and the opportunity to meet the speakers before, and it certainly whetted my appetite. So I think if you are thinking of doing this or any sort of similar voluntary role, it's a great opportunity. I think having Governors for Schools backing it and having a structure and support and the access to training around that is absolutely vital to help you succeed. But I've probably talked for long enough about my passion for volunteering, but how it can absolutely support your development as a people professional, certainly within the people profession and supported by CIPD. So I will probably leave it there, but look forward to lots of questions, and I'm sure you'll get loads from hearing to existing governors as well. So thank you, Will.
Thank you so much, Leah. Great to hear you. Great to hear great to hear all the experiences, and also wonderful that we whet your appetite with potentially becoming a school governor in the future. I'm sure there were plenty to give back, and lots of professional and personal development that you'll gain from the role. Really pleased now to hand over to Cassie.
Thanks, Will. So I'm going to start with a bit of an overview of my own experience as a governor. I started my career in local government, working in children and people services, working with schools, working with school admissions, working on safeguarding, and I'd been interested in being a school governor right from when I first came into the world of work, but wasn't able to do it until I came home to London, and there was a school governor opening, looking for my skill set in a school down the road about 4 years ago. And the school that I work with is, as I said before, a local authority funded primary school, very high levels of children with English as a second language, high levels of socioeconomic disadvantage, in-year mobility, so children who enter and leave the school during the year, and that sort of disruption to education, and a very high level of educational support needs. And for me, that really that connection to the community and seeing that wider perspective. I work in, very rarefied environments professionally, private equity, financial services, and it's, having that different view. And as I said, I've been there for 4 years. I do pretty much every committee going, and I'm about to take on the challenge of chair at the end of this term, subject to board approval. And I think it's key to emphasize I do two things with this. I do the things that fit with my existing professional background, and then I do the things that complement my personal experience and sort of cross over the two. So in terms of my professional background and what links there, I sit on the Finance and Resources Committee. My role for a number of years has been somewhere between HR, accounting, and a lawyer. So that really fits there, and that's scrutiny of budgets, it's scrutiny of decisions around procurement, it's looking at structures. So that's a really important part. I also sit on all of our senior leadership recruitment activity. I've gone through safer recruitment training with the NSPCC, so really giving me a different view on something that I occasionally do, but I tend to do board level and HR function recruitment. So this is a different view. I also sit on our pay and performance committee and our head teacher pay and performance reviews. And as well as that, I also have quite a lot of experience in corporate governance in a corporate perspective, advising boards, working on appointing boards, board remuneration. So bringing that then into the voluntary sector and sitting on a board and sort of being on the other side with other people advising me and working with an executive team. But I sort of have some context there, but it really, in all of those cases, develops my own understanding of my professional background and my professional skill set. And then I think there's also, we can't forget the personal development, and Leah's spoken about it, and as Will did also in his introduction. And I define myself, identity perspective. I'm a disabled queer woman. I'm a Londoner by birth, and I have a link role for inclusion on our school governor on our board, and spending time with leadership talking about the inclusion of children, whether that is educational support needs or it's around attendance. I had nearly 2.5 years off school in my senior school years, and a lot of time outside of school earlier. So bringing that perspective to bear and seeing how the school is supporting that, and being able to contribute oversight and other ideas to the leadership team really brings me a lot of personal rewards, as well as informing my sort of inclusion agenda in my professional world of work. I also sit on the Teaching and Learning Committee, and regularly visit the school, do story time in the library. Really passionate about literacy, and also do a number of outdoor education things, like going camping with the Year Sixes last year. So there's really a wide range of things that you can and you do get involved with, all of which you're contributing to the school and the oversight of those activities, and thinking about that from a strategic perspective, whilst also developing skills and that sort of personal sense of where you fit in your community and what you can kind of bring from a personal perspective. So I think over the years, as I said, it's really strengthened that experience. It's kept me current in terms of public sector, HR and pay, recruitment, unions, safeguarding, and also one of the things on reflection, it's really given me an example that I take back to my working environment of truly inspirational leadership. Our senior leadership team and our head teacher, I can but look on in awe at how they've managed not only the COVID crisis, but an incredibly challenging environment before that, and they do it with such professionalism, but also such humanity, and as an HR professional who works at that very senior level, and challenging and working with leaders of very many different types, whether that's investors or corporate, or talking about diversity and inclusion, having that example from my exposure as a school governor really gives me a different perspective. So with that in mind, I then wanted to, well, we were talking about flipping it and talking about what employers look for in leaders. I mean, leadership, you get lots of different definitions of it, and in my mind, when I think about leadership and the school governor role, how those go together, at the end of the day, you will be a leader if you know your stuff and have content and can make decisions, can see things from a strategic point of view, can see the big picture. If you can do that authentically, and if you can bring people along with you, whether those are people you manage or people in a wider organization who look to you as a leader, I think that's where you're sort of getting to. And for that, there's a number of different components. You can talk about soft skills, you can talk about on boards. I think Leah talked about different personalities, but that sense of collaboration, that cultivating that collegial sense of how do we move the strategy forward, how do we have oversight, but how do we support the senior leadership team? I think there's also something about assertiveness and appropriate challenge. You are there to ask the big questions, not necessarily overly intrusively, but you are there to give oversight. And then there's something about the sense of responsibility and accountability, taking pieces of the puzzle and saying, okay, I am the school governor who is looking at this thing, and if Ofsted come, I can answer to that. And then there is, of course, the exposure, as Leah also mentioned, exposure to being on a board, and I think that is highly rated. I'm personally looking at public appointments at the moment, and it's all previous experience on boards, so that's it's it is helpful. And then things like data analysis. I'm going through the National Governance Association's Chair Development Programme at the moment, and one of the things that we focus on is the data side of things, and what they call data triangulation, and how do you look at the different evidence bases that you get in a school, whether that's progress performance data from the government, or that's parent or pupil voice and reports from leaders, and how you sort of put that together and look strategically at progress and where issues or things to celebrate are. I think it is taking number crunching data analysis to the next level. So then with that in mind, it's then how those skills that you develop and how that work complements other things that you're doing maybe in the workplace. And I think for starters on there, it gives you a forum to practice the learning that you're doing in your day-to-day job. And maybe if you're at a level where you're not exposed to boards, you're not getting practice at sort of the data analysis necessarily in your day-to-day, but you're getting the training for it, you can then apply that in the school governance context. It also, you can also get a lot of training through being a school governor, whether that's recruitment, as I talked about, governance, or through using resources like the Key or the NSPCC or the NGA and your local authority, and even your board will give you training that you then can take back and use sort of conversely in your workplace. I think it's also it gives you a network of professionals from different disciplines who approach things differently that you then have in your network. So on our board, we have an auditor, an educational psychologist, an ex-head teacher, someone in social work, marketing, and really, it gives you lots of people who extend your network outside of your normal professional day to day. And then I think there's something about it giving you context for how lifelong learning works. School is a long time ago for most of us, and just that insight and overview in how what happens in schools flows into the world of work, and then your context for your world of work widens, and you can take that then back into the workplace and know things about the way that our systems work that maybe your colleagues don't, that give you an additional insight. And then, you know, I mean, Leah said this very well already, but I think one of the things that for myself I really value and really helped me in my workplace learning was at the point at which I started becoming a governor. I was really looking for an identity, but a professional identity beyond just the job that I did, and it really gave me the space to do that, the space to take a step back and set professional boundaries, to give myself time for this, whilst also it not just being about personal. So I think that is a really important facet of what being a school governor can give to you. And with that, I shall hand back to Will.
Thank you so much, Cassie. That was fantastic. Great to hear all the experiences that that being a school governor has afforded you. And I must go back to my school and find out how I can get involved in going on camping trips. Definitely a key takeaway for me. I wouldn't mind a trip away camping with the year sixes. And lastly, I'd like to turn to Jason to share with us for the next 10 minutes or so.
Excellent, thanks, Will. And afternoon, everybody, again. So I'll just start with a brief bit of background about myself. So I'm a principal civil engineer. I work in the design and execution of large infrastructure projects throughout the UK. So my background is very definitely engineering focused. I am involved in an awful lot of stakeholder management, a lot of project management, and leadership. I got into school governor role. As I said in my introduction, I'm a newly minted chair of governors on the local board, and also a trustee for the trust by virtue of that. But started out with governors of schools about three and a half years ago, and that was through having done a number of years of working with STEM engagement, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics engagement, with a large variety of schools, and looking to expose them to the wider world of engineering and maths that exists, in the quite fascinating world of engineering and maths. And it wasn't until a few people kind of said, you can give more, you can impact more, and you also have a great skill set as an engineer that actually will probably benefit a school board. So I got in touch with governors of school, and as they say, the rest is history. So thank you to governors of schools for that. What and how has this role helped me develop personally? I think is probably quite an interesting topic to talk about. So at my point, early 30s, I am approaching what I could probably call the midpoint in my career. I've progressed through my junior years at much the coalface of doing the design. I'm now moving into project management, leadership roles. I'm also starting to move by virtue of that into some of the senior management of the team that I'm in. So I'm in a team of about 24 engineers across the UK. So not quite at CEO level, but on a micro level, approaching a similar sort of role, just a bit further down the food chain. And a number of the decisions and conversations that I'm starting to be involved in, you can probably relate quite easily to board level decisions and conversations we have. So having got a bit of a head start in that, in being on a board, being involved in strategic conversations, and stepping away from the very much of the doing of the work. So the actual being involved at the coalface is quite a challenge. It certainly is a challenge as an engineer. We're quite used to playing in the detail and getting our hands dirty. So training yourself to step backwards, to be able to ask, as both Leah and Cassie said, the sometimes difficult, challenging questions in a nice way that isn't too probing, to actually just check that we're doing the right things, we're moving in the right direction, is quite an important skill to be able to develop. And that's not necessarily something that we generally learn as part of our initial professional development. Don't get me wrong, engineers, certainly in the civil engineering world, we have a minimum level of attributes that we expect to see for a professionally qualified engineer. And that covers things from management and leadership to your commercial ability, all the way through to the obvious ones like interpersonal skills and communication, and also your professional commitment. And that professional commitment extends beyond just engineering, and it extends into the world of volunteering. So something that our profession actively engages in. And as most professions would probably say, we could always do more in that world. So being able to have found that kind of base level of attributes, of skills, being able to put those into practice before getting to that point in my career has been hugely beneficial. Personally, a number of things have helped me along the way there, not just being part of the board and putting that to practice. As Leah is finding out, that the NGA's Chair for Development for Chairs course is fantastic. That opens you up to a network of really well diverse people who are in a similar sort of situation, who are either becoming or are chairs of boards. And I think one thing I took away from that course is that if it isn't obvious, every school is different. Every school's got a niche, niche set of challenges that need quite a diverse board to be able to solve. So, for example, the school I'm in at the minute has quite a high demand for safeguarding and pastoral care, and that drives quite a lot of the decision making that we have on the board. It stretches our resources quite a lot. I think as Leah mentioned, the amount of work and effort that the senior leadership team and even the whole teaching staff put in is awe-inspiring. There aren't any other words for that. There certainly are. It is a profession that I think everybody else could take some lessons from. Absolutely. And I've been involved in everything from interview panels, staff disciplinaries, unfortunately, and they do occur occasionally, medical dismissal panels, all the way through to pay and performance reviews, to sitting in awards evenings, which is the absolute opposite of some of those tougher meetings that you get in, but are equally as rewarding. And if you ever get the chance, I absolutely suggest you do that on an awards evening. It is all for and all about the students. So do get their perspective on a variety of things. And certainly as I've progressed into the chair role, I'm now starting to get involved in restructuring conversations. And those sorts of conversations, discussions, decision-making points are all things that I wouldn't necessarily get any exposure to at my point in my career, and certainly not in the company that I'm in at the minute. I work for quite a large organisation, so quite rightly the board of directors is quite a bit further up, not necessarily out of reach, but just not quite there yet. So everything I'm doing with governance of schools is putting me in good stead. Just to try and wrap up and give you guys opportunity to ask some questions, just in terms of going forwards, probably as most professions do have, I have a minimum requirement for continual professional development within engineering, and quite a lot of that is transferable between what I'm doing as a school governor and the skills that I'm developing there, to the skills that I need in my workplace. So dropping onto courses like the one that Leah is on, and equally some of the other kind of strategic decision-making courses, the courses on safeguarding, all go towards helping me in my day-to-day job, engaging with clients and stakeholders and pushing projects into the right direction. And equally, in some of those meetings, asking the difficult questions of the project boards that we're talking to. So being able to do that from my level is really, really rewarding. So I'll stop talking. I'll hand you back to Will, and we'll look forward to some interesting questions from you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Again, wonderful to hear, just the full range of experiences that you've been able to have been afforded to you as a school governor, and the way that they've impacted on your professional personal life. I, in turn, am going to hand over to my colleague Emma, who will take through sort of any questions that come in.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Will. And it was great to hear from all three of you. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. So I'm going to start with a question for all three of you, so you can decide who wants to answer first. How do you think governors can raise the profile of the experience they're gaining with their employers? Any specific tips for doing that? I'll pick on somebody. Cassie, thanks.
I'll start. I think it depends on the context that you're in. So I spent about 5 years at PwC, and there it was easier. We talked about what we were doing. I think we had a governors network, and so it was explicitly sort of talked about as part of end of year reviews. I got time off to do it, and I think you could bring it into the conversation when you were talking about skills that might mean that you could be allocated to a particular project, and they were looking for certain experience. Then you would say, you would make sure that the resourcing team knew, and you made sure that your sort of partners and directors, senior managers knew about that experience. I think in my experience of organizations that aren't professional services, where you've got resourcing teams that you can talk to, again, I do think talking about it at end of year, you can talk about what you've learned and put it in your development plan and say, these are things that I want to do, and yes, I'm going to develop them at work, but actually I'm also doing this thing as a school governor, and I'll maybe bring some feedback from that back into next year. Is perhaps an official way to do it, and just making sure that your managers know about it, talk about it. We all now are a bit more open about our personal lives, so yeah, just talk about it, talk about how great it is.
I think that's good advice. Go on, Leah.
I was just going to add to that. I think Cassie's absolutely right. I think talking about it, it's more human. But I think there's also lots of opportunities depending on the kind of organisation you work for. There's things like lunch and learns, or blogging is big. There's lots of intranet opportunity to talk. And if you've got forums at work, we have lots of employee resource groups that support, parents or people who do have external responsibilities. Any of those are a great opportunity to showcase what you do and what you get from it. And in my experience, people want to hear, I think Cassie's right, more than just your job persona. We've all been able to do that over the last 18 months, show more of our authentic selves, and this is a great way to do that. So I think some of those human elements of being at work and bringing your whole self to work is a way to do it.
Great stuff. Thanks, Leah. Jason, a question for you. Have you sought specific opportunities out in the governor role that you've not been exposed to in the work environment? I know you mentioned kind of quite broadly, but anything specific that springs to mind?
Good question. Specifically, I took on I stepped up quite early to chair the Finance, Audit and Resource Committee, which put me in a position I wouldn't have been in work in terms of the audit point of view and the financial challenge, and understanding the fact that we're in a deficit budget time, and how do you get out of a deficit budget whilst at the same time still achieving the strategic objectives that the school wants to achieve. And as I spoke about before, how we also balance the quite high demand for safeguarding and pastoral care of the students. And that was quite an interesting challenge and quite an interesting a couple of months where we worked through that. And that sort of a challenge just doesn't exist in my world. We can balance a project budget, but they're not really that complicated. And I'm sure there are probably many people in the profession currently screaming at me for saying that, but balancing a project budget is not hard, but balancing a school one is quite a challenge.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Being on a board that has been in deficit as well, it's a different set of challenges and very high stakes, I tend to find. But yeah, definitely a challenging and interesting area to be involved in. Cassie, you talked about leadership having a component of taking people with you. Any advice on someone as a governing board, particularly perhaps if they've not got education experience, about how to achieve that? Golden question.
I think there are a few pieces to it. I think where you have people who don't necessarily have an education background, I mean, it's important for anyone, but onboarding into the governor role is absolutely key. I mean, there was a session earlier in the week and this conference about sort of best practice there, and it's certainly a journey that we're going on as a governing board at the moment. Is how do we work out what people need when they're onboarded, whether that's educational, context, or just a buddy, or support ahead of meetings. I think there's also something around really getting to know the other governors and your leadership team, and focusing on flexing your style for different people. Different people have different amounts of time, they have different backgrounds, they have different personalities, and some people deal well with a more frank approach. Some people deal well with more, British talking around the edges of things, and just, working out what needs to be said in a governing board meeting and what might warrant a follow-up phone call, or saying to someone, actually, that's a really good point, and speaking to them beforehand and saying, why don't you speak to the head, about that before the meeting. I think there's also something about making sure that your leadership team are never blindsided. If there's something really where there's a potential for a big discussion in a board meeting, don't just raise it at the board meeting. Send the head teacher a note ahead of time, let the chair know. It's common courtesy, but it also really helps everyone feel like you're sort of on the same side, and particularly as going into the chairing role and talking to the head and seeing some other context that I've had the opportunity to observe. It's really important for the head teacher and chair to have a really good relationship. It's really important for the head teacher and senior leadership team to feel like the board are behind them.
Yeah.
So not blindsiding with something. I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but if there's something that might cause conflict, that's important.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's about giving them opportunity to prepare to answer as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Not everybody has, all the stats in their head at every minute of the day.
Exactly.
Great. I have a question here that I think would be more aimed at Jason and Cassie, but has there been any point where you felt out of your depth personally, or and how have you motivated yourself / picked yourself up from that?
I'll go. I think every board meeting. I mean, as a non-education professional, I mean, I've got a little bit of context from my time in public sector, but the challenges are so big, and they're so varied, as from what Jason was talking about balancing these budgets to how do you deliver a holistic curriculum that meets all the standards? How do you measure progress? How do you make sure that, you know, even those with educational needs have the same you know, experience and quality of learning as higher retainers? How do you keep higher retainers higher retaining? There's so many different challenges, and I think if you didn't feel like you were a bit out of your depth, then I'd almost think that there's something wrong there. And I think, you know, knowing where to go to deal with that, you know, as far as possible, reading papers ahead of time. So if there's anything, a question you have, you can just knock a note to the chair or the head teacher. Using resources like the Key or the NGA or the NSPCC or government, you know, the Department of Education. There's so many resources out there. And, you know, using buddies, using your other board members, having those relationships where you can talk to them. You're not, as a governor, you don't have to cover everything. So you just have to remember you're sort of not alone, and try to answer the questions, but don't worry about feeling out of your depth. I think is where I would land on that question.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Jason, anything to add to that?
I think I just strongly echo what Cassie just said there. If you're not out of your depth, feeling out of your depth at every point in a meeting, then probably is something wrong. And I think I just highlight kind of the point that it is a board of governors, is that you should recognise that no one person on that board has all the answers and all the skills that are required. That the whole point of having a board is to be able to bring in every skill that you need, but whilst recognising that, you know, the chair of the board isn't going to have all the answers. The person who's newly just joined isn't going to have all the answers. The whole point is to work together to do that and to draw on the skills of each individual person as you need them. I have no experience in the education sector, so every time conversations come up about setting the curriculum, about measuring progress and attainment, I really do feel out of my depth. I'm getting better at it, but actually that's a point for improvement, and that drives personal development. So as Cassie said, ask the chair, ask the other governing boards, use things like the Key or the NGA's training modules, or even your local authority stuff. You know, there are plenty of people out there, and I can safely say when I walk into my first trustee meeting next month, I'm going to be so far out of my depth it's untrue. I've never sat on a trustee board before, so that's going to be quite an interesting and probably nerve-wracking exercise. So just don't worry about it, and give what you can, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And just remember that most other people on the board are feeling like that as well, I think. We're all kind of in the same boat. Another question, which I'll put out to everybody, maybe Leah could help more with this one. How do you think it's best to recruit skilled corporate volunteers? We have many channels open to us in my company, but any thoughts on how to cut through the noise to really showcase the opportunity as good for you and good for the company too?
I think that's a great question, because there are lots of different opportunities out there, and how do you make it stand out? I think there's probably two things that are key when we look at programs we've had really good success with. I think the first is to be really clear about the kinds of skills that you can develop in a role of that nature, because that will attract people who are keen to fulfill that, have expertise in that, and want to develop those skills further. And making it a real sort of selling the benefits of that role in that way, I think, is key. But I also think, secondly, there's no substitute for hearing from somebody who's doing that role. I think it's about bringing it to life. Sometimes, you know, just a description of a volunteering opportunity will be one thing, but it leaps off the page as soon as you have a video clip of somebody who is a governor for a school and can tell you warts and all what to expect. And as Jason and Cassie just did, give you some reassurance about feeling out of your depth, but what you'll equally get from the learning opportunity. So I think treating it as those, I guess covering those two would make it incredibly palatable for the group that you're trying to attract. But yeah, bringing it to life, I think that's what sets it apart from a whole list of other opportunities and initiatives.
Can I briefly Briefly, Emma, I would just absolutely echo what Leah said. Obviously, a lot of the work that we do at Governors for Schools, we go out and we give presentations to people to become school governors, and we can weave in our own experiences, because obviously many of us at the charity are school governors ourselves. But it's always fantastic, and we always look to include people from within that particular company to come and share their experience of being a governor. If they've been a governor for 6 months, or they've been a governor for six years, it's fantastic. It really helps bring it to life and show that the role itself is achievable, and that it's being done by people like them who have the same professional pressures and the same professional, in many cases, the same sort of professional skills and outlooks.
Yeah, very much so. I've got another question. So as a governor, can I share my skills with the staff of the school I'm a governor of? For example, if they don't have a specialist on mental health, can a governor give a workshop? How do I go about offering this option if it's not available? Any thoughts on sharing your specific expertise almost outside of the governing board role, but as a bit of a sideline to support maybe staff at the school? Any thoughts on that?
I think there's two pieces to it. I think if you think that you've got something to offer, I mean, I've talked to our school about doing careers type events. It's pretty tricky in primary, but they are there. And I think it probably depends on what you want to offer. There's, as long as there's not sort of a commercial side to it where there might be some problems around conflicts of interest, I think, if it's something applicable, talk to your leadership team. It may be, I mean, there's a big focus on well-being in schools at the moment, and so it sounds to me like that kind of skill set would be welcomed. It might be that you that it's more appropriate to offer something to staff, or to talk about it in the governing board meeting and offer your skills about who else is in the market and how they might approach it that way. But I think it depends. I would talk to your head teacher, talk to the leadership team who look at that particular area, and see what the opportunities are.
Absolutely. I think there is, there's definitely opportunity to build links for the school that support the school outside of the governing board meetings. Like Cassie mentioned, there's that conflict of interest that you've got to consider, and also maybe putting it in a way that you're not going to be sensitive to a response if it's a no, if they've already got somebody else, or feel that somebody else's services might fit their needs better, because you wouldn't want it to impact on your relationship with other people on the board as well. Somebody had asked another question that's just disappeared. Oh, sorry, Will's looking at questions as well. Do your employers, Cassie and Jason, give any time off for taking on the governor role? And I guess Leah as well, do you know of many employers that do that? Jason?
I was just going to say really quickly, I put an answer in there that lots of employers do give volunteering days off, and you can chunk some time that way. In my trustee role, I do things in the evening, so it doesn't affect me too much, but I'll let Jason and Cassie talk specifically to the governor role.
My organisation doesn't give specific days for volunteering, but we do have quite a flexible approach to it. So if I, for example, right now, I'm slightly outside of my lunch hour, but it's helped by we're a factor on Zoom, and I'll being given the hour to do this because it's well worth it. And usually board meetings for me are towards the end of the day. So that helps quite a lot with the working day. But when there are things going on in school that are during the day, normally the conversation with my line management team will yield some space in my calendar, and we shuffle things around. I do know other companies, certainly in the construction industry, that do give an allowance of a number of days for volunteering, be that 2, be that 5, depending on who you work for. It's all kind of a muchness. It's doing the same thing. It's just certainly my organisation it's more flexible than it is a rigid. You've got 2 days away you go. So I don't know if Cassie's got anything to add to that.
You had any experience of it, Cassie?
Yeah, I just echo what both Leah and Jason have said. I've worked for an organisation that gave you an allowance of days. I've also been lucky to, whilst I've been doing, I've always worked for employers who didn't really care where you were and when you did your work, as long as you got it done. So I think you know, if you've got an employer that gives you flexibility, then it shouldn't be a problem. As Jason said, they're generally towards the end of the day, but even, you know, half days for visits, it's easier in either a remote environment, or if you are local to a school. So either if the school is local to your work or your school is local to home, that does make it a lot easier. I think if you're in a more structured working environment where maybe even post-COVID flexible working isn't possible, or you work shift patterns or whatever, I think I mean, it's part of the skills that you learn as a governor, but how to have adult conversations about these things. Talk to your line manager, you know, see if things can be moved around, see if you can swap a shift one week, or see if you know, you can flex and, you know, you'll finish off that project, or can you have a meeting slightly earlier. If people know that this is what you're doing it for and the skills that you're developing are recognized, then hopefully a slightly more informal ad hoc approach works. It does rely on a good relationship with your manager, but perhaps that's a different approach.
Absolutely, thank you. Just one of the people in our audience is pointing out that Deloitte actually give 3.5 hours a month for volunteering, and colleagues can use an agile working policy. So it's worth talking to HR about the kind of policies that are out there. But for now, it has flown by and it's already 2:15. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to Leah, Jason and Cassie. Really appreciate your time and sharing your experiences with us today. We're just coming to the end of the conference, so the end of this session, sorry, but obviously there's lots of other conference sessions that people can sign up to, so please do go and have a look on the website, share your thoughts with the hashtag GfS Conference 21 on social media. And we could just have the last slide, please, Ollie. Following me closing down this webinar, there will be a short survey that comes up, and if you do just have a few minutes just to help us kind of shape what will hopefully be next year's conference, we would really appreciate that. But thank you ever so much to our speakers, and thanks very much for your time today.